Daf Yudalad Amid Base, 14b, where Daf Yudalad Amid Base in Shekalim at the Mishnah at the top of the page. Ein Pachas Mishiva Amar Kollel. There were no less than 7 administrators that were at the level of Amar Kollel. Whatever they said what needed to be followed through. So they were some sort of executives. Mishlosh Gizbarim, and 3 people that were in charge of the accounts. And you don't have leadership on the community that were less than 2, so that it wasn't one person in total control, they would have 2. Besides for Ben Achia, who was in charge of the medicine or the care for those that were ill, had stomach aches. And Elazar that was in charge of the curtains, because those 2 the community accepted as is to be in charge alone. So the Gemara says that there was a little more of a hierarchy as well. No less than 3 that were in charge of the accounts. They were gizbar, so they were the accountants and in charge of care for the funds. And 7 executives. Tani Mishnei Katlikim. So there were another 2 on top of them. There were 2 Katlikim were the ones that had the last say. Although the Chsiv, so this is what it means when it says in the pasuk in Divrei Hayamim, it lists 10 people and saying that they were in charge, and then they were in the hands of Kananyo and Shimi. So it explains that. The first 3, it says that they were Yechiel, Uzoya, Nachas, Gizbarim. They were the ones in charge of the funds. Ba'asayil, Ve'yerimos, Ve'yizaved, Ve'eloil, and Eliel, and Yismachyahu, and Machas, and Benayohu. So they were Pakidim, they were in charge. So they were the Amar Kollel. They were the executives. And Pakidim Yad Kananeh V'Shem Yachav, and they were on top of them. There were another 2. So those were the Kananeh and Shimi. They were the chief executives. And the Katholikin B'Mifkad Yechazkiyahu Melech Ve'Uzio Neged Beis Elokim. And then they were in charge, and they would report to the king, Yechazkiyahu the king, as well as Azaryahu, the prince of the house of Hashem, meaning the Kohen Gadol. HaMelech ve'Kohen Gadol, the king and the Kohen Gadol, they were the top executives, obviously, as the not the ones that were working daily on it, but the ones the final say. So the Gemara now explains the system of oversight that they had. So these are how the seals went. HaGizbar, one of the 3 Gizbarim, one of 3 people in charge of the funds, would seal it and then hand it over to one of the Markolim, and also the Amarko, to the executives. The Amarko gave it to a chief executive, and the Katlikin Kohen Gadol, he would seal it and give it to Kohen Gadol. And this way, there were 4 seals to get to the king, and then he would give it to the king. So this way, the king would get it. It was already sealed by 4 levels. And when it was broken, the seals were broken in order to get into it. So the king would see that his seal was in place, and then he would break that seal, open it. The Kohen Gadol would see his seal and break it. The chief executive would do that. The Amarko would do the same, and then the Gizba, and then the one in charge of the funds would see his seal and open it. And this is the way they would get in. So they would count it and have each level counted and seal it. And then they would break that seal for each level and then make sure that it's all in place as it was. And there would be no one given a job of leadership over the community if it wasn't shared with someone else, so there wouldn't be a single entity as ruler. And the source of that is that it says that when the collection of funds in the building of the Beis Hamikdash, the building of the Mishkan, and it says, and they shall take the gold and the blue wool and purple wool, etc. So you see that it must be more than one. Now the Gemara gets into the wealth of a leader and the danger within that. So it says Moshe Rabbeinu became wealthy from the residue, or from the what was left after the engraving of the stone of the tablets. The tradition is that the tablets were of sapphire. The luchos were of sapphire, and so the shavings that came off made Moshe rich. Engrave for yourself, two stone tablets of stone. The psolas, what remains, will be of yours. However, Chana says no. It was a miracle that when Moshe pitched his tent once, they found that there was a chest of gold and silver there. There was of fine stones, gems. In other words, that he found a treasure. It says after the golden calf, and Moshe moved his tent outside of the community, and it was hard to look at Moshe for he had prayed for Bnei Yisrael, but he came down with a shine on his face. Vabitu acharei Moshe. They looked after Moshe, meaning they followed. Everybody watched him as he went to his tent, to his tent. Two Chachamim say, Chad Amar L'gnai v'Chad Amar Shvach. Some say that there were those that looked at Moshe with disgust, and those that say that there were those that looked at Moshe. They were looking at Moshe. What were they looking? For praise. So Manam L'gnai, the ones that say L'gnai, what was it that they said? Chamun Shakin, look at his thighs. Chamun Karin, look at his feet. Chamun Kopet, look at his girth. Achil min the Yehudai, v'shasam min the Yehudai. He eats from the Jews, he drinks from the Jews. Kol midilei min the Yehudai. Everything that he has is from the Jews. And so this is a not untypical response that people have to leadership, that they see as everything that the leader has coming from the community, even though that Moshe gave everything to the community, nevertheless, that's the way it was looked at. And the one who says that it was for praise, so they said, look at this tzaddik, and they looked at the merit that they had, the great merit that they had to look at Moshe Rabbeinu. So now the Mishnah is going to enumerate the various types of seals they had to tell, so that they can differentiate between each fund or each chest, what type of funds were in there, what type of deal was in there. So Dalit Chasamas Mikdash, there were 4 different types of seals. Because of Alein, and it was written upon them, Egel, a calf, Zochar, which is the Dichra, which is a ram, Gedi, a young goat, and the chote, and the sinner. That's what was written on them. And the reason for this is that the different karbanos require different amounts of oil in each one. So for the meal offering for a karban that was made of bakar, was made of cattle. So it would have gimel esrenim solas. It would have 3 measures of isaron of flour, bolol b'chatzi hin shemen, and it'd have a half a hin of oil, and the wine was half hin. So therefore, that amount, that measure, that value would have its own seal. This is a chosam. This is a seal for an egel of a calf, because it was for cattle, and the ayil, a ram. So there was a seal for a ram. The ram actually needed 2 esronim. Instead of 3 measures of flour, it would have 2 isorim measures of flour, and it would have a third of a hin of oil, and it had a third of a hin of wine. And the gedi, the third seal, which was a goat, so that was for a lamb, and a lamb karban needed only a single isaron of flour, a single measure of flour, and it was mixed in a quarter hin of oil, as opposed to a third for a ram or a half a hin for cattle, and it had a quarter hin of wine. So all these were distinct, and therefore they needed their own seal, so that it was prepared and ready as its own. We'll see that these seals were essentially tickets to acquire these measures. V'hadalid, and the fourth one was a chote. That was the sinner's seal, and these were for somebody that was a metzora, somebody that had a leprosy, that had a tzaras, and so with tzaras, there's actually two types of karbanos. If someone can afford it, then they would have to bring 3 animals as their karbanos, and so therefore they would need 10 lug of oil, 3 for each one of the karbanos, and 1 because there was also a pouring of the oil on the thumb and a large toe as a part of the immersion in the community process. So for the wealthy, wealthy or able metzora, they would get the chote, a sinner's seal, and that told them that they needed these 10 lug, these 10 measures of oil. Whereas Rabbi, the Mishnah says that Ben Azai says, hey, that there was a 5th one as well for the poor metzora. He would also have one, and as the Gemara is going to explain, that he included one for, even though that the carbon was similar, it was basically a simple single carbon, and so all he needed was one of the other seals, and that's the first opinion. He says no, because there was also a need for the additional hin, a lug, as well as so that it's not confused. He's not given a wealthy mitzora's value, which would be more than what was needed. So Ben Azai says it was 5. Va'aram is kasavalin, and it was written in Aramaic, not in Hebrew. Egel, a calf. Dachar, a ram. Gedi, a goat. Chote dal, a poor sinner. Chote ashir, and a wealthy sinner. So Egel mashamash nichse bakar. So the calf, that was for somebody that brought a larger animal, cattle. So for that korban, you'd have nesachim, the libations for that. Whether it was large or small, zachar and akevis, whether it was male or female. Gedi and the goat, that's mashamesh that would serve with larger animals, whether it was a ram or a ewe. So larger and smaller, zchar medekavis, male and female. Chutz mishal elim. But for the ayil, for the ram, that seal went only for ayil. Ayil mashamashem nisle elim bavad, only for a male, large sheep, which is a ram. The sinner's seal, that went for the libations, for the oil and wine, for the three animals of a Masorah. Mishu mavakish nisachim. So anybody that needed such libations, such oil, so what would he do? He would go to Yochanan Shumamun al Chasamas, who was in charge of these seals, which essentially, as I said, were like tickets. And he would pay what was needed for what he needed. And then he would get a seal that said, that was basically a receipt that he paid. And then he could go over to the chamber where they actually held the oil, and he can pick up what he had a ticket for. Who was in charge of the oils. And he would give him that seal, and then he would get in return the oils that he needed, and then he can bring his carbon. And that evening, they would come to each other, and Achia would have all the seals, all the tickets that had been cashed in. And he would, and then Yochanan, who would give him all the funds that he had received in the value of those seals that he had redeemed and given out oil for. And if it was short on money, it was out of his own pocket. Yochanan would have to pay out of his pocket. If it was additional funds, then it would go to the hektish, meaning somebody had purchased a ticket and not cashed it in, and so that would be a sort of a win for the hektish. Sheyad hektish al yenim, because hektish always wins out. You don't want to end up using funds of hektish, so you always are going to be strict and make sure that the funds go to hektish. Misha avat chesami, and somebody who lost his seal had that day only to pick up his oils. Mamtina le'ad erev, would wait until the evening, and that's it. If you found his seal, they would give it to him. And if not, they would not give it to him. And not only that, each seal had a date on it. V'shem hayoyim kasav aleim ibnei aramayim, and the date of that seal was on it, so that people could not break it or imitate it. And we'll see soon the elaborate number system that was on it. So according to Ben Azai, why do we need a separate seal for the Metzora, the sinner who was poor? After all, he could just bring a seal that had a single lamb, and that would be sufficient, or a goat. Maybe Luga Imoy. The reason is because you need another additional lug of oil to put on his thumb and his fingers, on his toe. Baram Karabanan, however, the Rabbanan say, maybe Gedi, that all he needs is the seal of the Gedi. Wait, Nitzle Rachel Mamin Ma, according to them, so according to the Rabbanan, it's a question. What about the extra oil? Where did they get it from? Now the Mishnah did not mention the libations for a ram, for a lamb, because it said gedi, a goat. What about a lamb? So what is this? The Tanin, we learned gedi mashamish, that the gedi, this goat seal, actually would be valid for all sheep as well. Nisrei tzayin, the libations, the wine and the oil for tzayin, for the sheep, went for large and small, goats and sheep. So a lamb and a goat were the same. It says, as the Torah says, you will do this for a single bull, or for a single ram, or for a lamb of kavasim, or of goats of izim. So lashor echad lama nemar. So what does the Torah teach us when it says for one ox? To tell you that there's no distinction between a calf, a young ox, and a bull, an older. Because I may have thought that the libation needed for a young sheep, uben bakar tonesachim, so too a young calf needs libations. And we find that Torah made a distinction between a lamb and an adult, a ram. So now we're on 15a at the top. So perhaps I'd also make a distinction between a calf and a bull and an ox. That's what the Torah says. So shall you do to the one bull. Tells you that there's no distinction between a calf and an adult a bull. And then the Torah says, or for an ayal singular. So what is that coming to teach us? Since the Torah made a distinction between the first year of life of a lamb, and then the second year when it's a ram. So once it's already a ram, there's a different a measure of oil. So perhaps in the third year of its life, it gets even more. One ram, meaning once it turns into a ram, it's in its second year, second, third year, etc. It's always going to have the same libation, so same nisachim. And why did it say for a lamb in sheep? Because it was. I would have thought since the Torah made a distinction between a lamb and a ram, so perhaps also for a ewe, and there's a distinction. A lamb in the second year that became an adult and a female would also have a different measure. To tell you that the lambs in sheep and lambs are going to be the same, whether it is an adult or not. And why did it say by goats? Same thing. Because I may have thought because by a male sheep, it went from the first year, the second year, there's a distinction that a ram has more libations. So too, by a buck, an adult goat, I would say that it was a male goat, that it was a different measure. That's what it says by goats. And that the youngest of the goats to the oldest of the male goats are all going to be the same halacha. Just as they have 3 lug, so too they have 3 lug, a quarter of a hin, and that's the same for everyone. And it would say the name of the day. So well, that's not sufficient because you could just cut off that part of the day. Shem Mishmah Yakazim. They also wrote the name of the Mishmar, which watch was in charge. There were a split of Mishmaras, and every week they would switch out which Mishmar was in charge. And it would say the name that it was this day of the Mishmar that's in charge. So let's say the Cohen family. Well, he could cut that off too. Shem Hayoim, Shem Shabbos, Shem Chodesh, Hayakasim. Let's say the day, the week, and the month was written on them. So you had which family was in charge, which day of the week it was, week it was and which month it was. So he couldn't cut off all the information because then there would be nothing left on this ticket, and so therefore that was the way they would have the ticket that they could bring and receive the oil that they need. Now, besides for the deposit boxes for tzedakah, which was the shekel donation box, which we saw, there were other donation boxes as well. Shtei lishkas hayim mikdash were two other donation boxes. Achas lishkas chashay. One was called the silent box. Achas lishkas kalim. One was the vessel box. So lishkas chashayim, the silent box. What was that? Yirei people who feared sin and didn't want to hurt other people, even when they're doing a mitzvah. They would quietly put in coins into that box. And the poor people who they were too ashamed to collect tzedakah would come at night and would be able to go and take some funds from there. And they could take silently from there privately. So this way, the person putting in tzedakah had no idea who was getting it. The person who was collecting tzedakah didn't know who was getting it, who put it in there, and nobody had to know that they were in such dire straits that they needed this. Lishkas HaKelim, the other box, which was the fund of the vessels. Anybody that would donate a vessel, meaning clothing or jewelry, something that was already turned into something, they would put it into there. And every 30 days, the Gizbar, one of the Gizbarim or the Gizbarim, three of them would go in and open that box. And any vessel that was worthy of the Bedek Habayis, meaning that Beis Hamikdash needed it itself, so they would leave it for the Bedek Habayis. Vashar and the rest would be sold, and the funds would go to the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. And the Gemara is going to challenge that and say that actually the item itself could go to the Beis Hamikdash itself. We'll see. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi and Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachman have in Parnasim. These two great Chachamim, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi and Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachman, they were Parnasim. They were in charge of making sure that everybody had the needs that they have. They would give Rabbi Chama, the father, Rabbi Hoshaya, a dinner, which is not a small coin, and he would then give it to people privately. Rabbi Zechariah Chassid of Rabbi Levi, Rabbi Zechariah, the son-in-law of Rabbi Levi, people would always wonder about him and talk about it. Why he doesn't seem to need money, and yet he takes from the silent box from the tzedakah that the poor need to take from, and he seems to take from there. However, when he passed away, Badkin, they checked. They found that he had marked down and seen and written everybody that he had taken tzedakah for and delivered it to them. So people who were embarrassed to go themselves, he would take the tzedakah on their behalf and then give it to them. Rabbi China bar Papa have a maflig, and he would do that at night when nobody would see. So this way, it would save their dignity. Rabbi China bar Papa have a maflig mitzvah b'leil. Similarly, Rabbi Chinana, the son of Papa, he would give such tzedakah. He would give it at night. He would deliver it to people's houses under their door. One night, he's walking around at night, giving out tzedakah, and he meets the leader of the spirits of the Shadim. Amalei Loikein Alfin, didn't you learn that Alfin Rabbi, didn't you teach or learn don't encroach on the space of your fellow? I mean, nighttime is my space. And what are you doing hanging out? Amalei Loikein Ksiv. He said to him, but doesn't it say this as well? Matim b'seisa yachape af. That when you give in hiding, you give silently or quietly so nobody knows, that wipes away the anger. So he took that as like he's saying, I can wipe you off the map. The verse does not say how fortunate and how good is it for a person that he gives to the poor. No, that's not what it says. Ella, rather, what does the pasuk say? Ashrei maskil eldal. How fortunate is the one who thinks about the giving to the poor, who is considerate and think Ashrei maskil eldal. Fortunate is the one who thinks and it uses his seichel, chachma, wisdom to try and figure out how to give it to the poor in the best way. So looks at this mitzvah of giving to the poor, how to do it in a way that would not be offensive to the one receiving the tzedakah. So what would Rabbi Yonah do? When he saw a poor person who used to be wealthy or came from a wealthy family, and so for that person, receiving tzedakah is even more difficult emotionally. So besides for the financial needs, he was also trying to take care of their emotional needs. So Sheyarem and Chasav, this person was now lost his money and he needed assistance. He would say to him, Bani, my son, I heard that there's some money coming to you in a short while, coming from another distant country. There's an inheritance coming to you. So I have an idea. Tol vat pareya. Here, take some money, and when you get that, you'll pay it back. So this way, the person willingly accepted. Oh wow, there's money coming to me, and he's fronting it. Once he gave it to him, Amalei, he said, and by the way, don't worry about the debt. It's not a loan. It's a gift. When if and when that money comes, you'll give it back. But I'm not writing this down. You don't owe me anything. In this way, he would. He feels like he's just getting a loan, and that there's money that's really his coming his way, so he doesn't feel so uncomfortable taking the money, but he also doesn't have the burden of the loan when the money never shows up, right? Because he made up this story. He doesn't have the burden of the loan because after he accepted, he said, "Oh, by the way, it's not a written loan. It's not a loan. It's a gift entirely." He said that there were elders in his day. Anybody gave him money between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, they would accept it. Minbasa came, but after Yom Kippur they wouldn't take it. Amen, they said, the shutdown gabon, that whatever was meant for this year is already by me, because between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur is when they were judged and given what they needed for the year. And so they would only accept tzedakah during that time. And the rest of the year, they have to make do with what they were able to make financially. Nehemiah is shichin, and Nehemiah, Pagabay Yerushalmi Echad, he met somebody from Yerushalayim. Amalei zakei im yichad tarnagolta. He said to him, he was very poor, and he said, do a tzedakah with me. In other words, merit tzedakah by giving me a chicken. He said, I'm starving, I'm hungry, give me a chicken. Amalei halacha tomise de kupet. He said to him, look, I'm not giving you a chicken, but I'll give you some money. Go to the butcher and you can buy yourself meat. I'm giving you more money than you need for a chicken. I'm giving you enough for meat. But he wasn't used to it. V'zavin kupet, and he bought a piece of meat, v'achal, he ate it, umis, and he died. Meaning he had been so hungry and he'd not been used to eating meat that it was harmful to him. And people said, come to the funeral of the man that Nehemiah killed. And obviously it's very harsh. He gave tzedakah to him. The idea is that sometimes the good intentions of tzedakah don't see the need of the particular person. So the Gemara speaks of a very tragic story, even more tragic than before. Nachum ish Gamzu. Nachum was a man of a place, Gamzu, but he was the play on his city was that it was split the word into two, Gamzu into Gamzu, this as well. And so he was often, when things didn't go right, he would say, Gamzu Latova, this too is for good. So he was known as Nachum, the man of this too. This too is good. And he was bringing food to his father-in-law. and somebody that was ill, clearly ill, meaning maybe he had boils on him, meaning he was clearly unwell, unhealthy, came to him and he said, give me some of the food you have. Now, he had prepared this nice dish for his in-laws. Amar le mechzor chazar. He says, mechzor, when I come back, I'll bring you some. And it wasn't far, and he didn't assess it to see that this guy was in mortal danger. But he didn't give him for what he had. Chazar, when he came back, by the time he came back, this man had already died. Amar le kiblesi, he cursed himself and he said, look, the eyes that saw you and didn't understand properly your plight and therefore ignored you, they should become blind. The hands did not reach out to give to you, they should be cut off. And the feet that did not rush to give to you, they should break. And indeed, this happened to him, that he became blind, lost his limbs. Salak Abe Rabbi Akiva, when he was ailing, having lost his limbs and his eyesight. So Rabbi Akiva came to visit him. Woe to me, Rabbi Akiva, a student said, that I see you in such pain. Woe is to me that I don't see you in such pain. Why are you cursing me? Why are you making light of my pain? Maybe this is good for me, and you're saying it's bad. Rabbi Shaya Rabbi the Bray Chad Saginor. Rabbi Shaya the Great, he had a teacher for his son who was blind. And he would, after learning with his son, he would invite him for a meal every day. Once he had guests, and he didn't invite him to eat with his family together with the guests. And after the meal that evening, he went up to the blind teacher and he said to him, please, my teacher, do not be upset with me. Begin the Havali because today I had guests. The Amris, I didn't want you to come and then you would look needy because you're blind, then we'd have to take care of you. I didn't want the guests to see that. So I'm here to bring you your food and to take care of you. But it was out of respect for you that we didn't have you over today. That's why I didn't invite you over to eat with us today. Said, thank you. You appeased somebody who cannot see but is seen. The one that cannot be seen but sees. Hashem, Yekabel Piyusach, should accept your appeasement, meaning whenever you pray, you daven to Hashem, should be accepted. Said, that's a beautiful prayer. Where do you hear that? I heard this from Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Oil had the Sagin Ohara Lekarte. A blind person came to his village. Yosef le Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov l'Ramini. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov wanted to make sure that people donate to this fellow. So he sat himself beneath or right next to and lower than this person who was blind without saying anything to him. But Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, being the leader, sitting at the foot of this blind person, people thought, this person must be a great sage. He must be the teacher of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. The Himrin Iluli David Bar Nasha Rabbi, if not for him being a great sage or a teacher, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov would not sit lower than him by his feet. Avdon leParnasas, the people were giving him money. The acre, so that he would have what to eat. So Amar Lein Ma'hachan. See, he was new in the town and people giving him money. He says, what's going on? Amar Lein, they said to him, Eliezer ben Yaakov Yosef l'Raminoch. It's because Eliezer ben Yaakov is sitting right here at your feet. With Saliyah Levi Hadat Salisis, he prayed for him this prayer. This is what he said to him. You did a kindness to someone who is seen but cannot see. The one who can see but is not seen. Hashem, Yigmal Yasach Chesed, will do Chesed with you. Rabbi Chama bar Chanina and Rabbi Shaya have a metailin be'ilim knishta delut. Rabbi Chama, the son of Chanina, and Rabbi Yoshaya, they were taking a walk. They were walking around in the shul of Lud. Now, the shul of Lud was built by the parents of Rabbi Chama bar Chanina. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Rabbi Yoshaya, kama mom and shika avoisai. Look how much money my parents put into this building. Yeah, think about how many lives they could have saved with the money, how many families and people they could have fed, and that was all sunk into this building. Were there no people studying Torah that were poor that could have used those funds? Rabbi Avin Tari. Similarly, Rabbi Avin made these gates for the Siddur Rabbah, for the study hall. He beautified the building. Asa Rabbi Mana came. Amalei Chami Mai Avdis. Look at what I did. Amalei, yeah, you think that's good? Vayishkach Yisrael Aseseu. Yisrael forgets their creator. Vayivin Achalas. So they build buildings. There were no people that were toiling in Torah that were hungry that they could have fed them. So here the Chachamim is saying, yes, building the Beis Hamikdash, building buildings is important, but and feels good. It's prestigious, but it's not as important or as good as taking care of the poor and those that study Torah. Tani, Kachim Mizbeach. So the last halacha of the Mishnah, we learned that Kachim Mizbeach Matzinas Aroi Lehen, that something that was dedicated for Bedek Habayis, for the upkeep of the building, you can take from there for the Mizbeach, which is holier, Mikasha Bedek Habayis. However, that which the building fund needs cannot take from the Mizbeach fund. And what we learned in our Mishnah, that which is donated and the building fund can use, they keep, and the rest are sold. Well, sold for what? For the main of the Bedek Habayis. Since the funds are going for the Bedek Habayis, what are they selling it for? It doesn't go for Bedek Habayis. It goes for they put it into the fund, and since it was donated for that fund, it remains in that fund. Hadran Alach, Perek Elav Hamamunim. With this, we complete the fifth Perek Hamamunim and Elay Hamamunim. We should come back to Bez Hashem. Have a great day.